Well, seconds matter when a patient with shortness of breath shows up at an emergency room. That is one of the signs of COVID-19. But shortness of breath is also one of the symptoms of a heart problem. And now, with the help of some local research, a new test could help doctors diagnose patients faster and with more accuracy. Alex Ositis is on your side explaining how the test works and why it could make a big impact in less populated areas.
Yeah, doctors say that this may be a game changer, being able to tell the difference on the fly when it comes to heart problems and those that may be related to COVID-19.
You're probably familiar with the readout of an electrocardiogram, an EKG. The 120-year-old tech measures the heart's signals, but with the help of artificial intelligence and research from Mayo Clinic, doctors are getting a chance to see decreased heart function sooner.
Provides an opportunity to link them early to cardiovascular care so we do not miss them in the emergency room.
A look at the 10-second test, which can help sort out why patients are short of breath, an underlying heart condition, or in the age of COVID-19, point to another cause.
This tool can identify someone who comes in short of breath, whether due to COVID or not, who has underlying cardiac dysfunction.
The AI EKG recently gained approval from the Food and Drug Administration, meaning with time the test could gain use across the country, particularly in rural areas where access may pose a challenge.
Where a cardiologist is not available, then this provides additional information that the provider would otherwise not have because they didn't have an echo.
Reporting, Alex Ositis, First Coast News, on your side.